Joey Del Marco was raped, or so she says. A couple weeks ago, she pre-gamed with some of the junior guys from our school, Tim Delaney, Luke Friedman, and George Wright. They finished a bottle of vodka and crammed into the backseat of a cab, and that's when she said it happened. She's saying that's when they raped her. But the guys are just saying that she was wasted and just hooked up with all of them. But the thing is, if you know Joey at all, her story is pretty fucking hard to believe, because Joey's all like, yeah, I'm a slut and I own my sexuality and I'm on the dance team and I hook up. And look where it got her. It landed her in the backseat of a cab with a group of boys who think that she wanted it because she pretty much acts like she wants it. You know what I'm saying? And the boys, Tim, Luke, and George, were arrested, and now they're on academic probation waiting for all of this to play out, and no one's heard from Joey. None of her friends on the dance team, and especially not her best friend, Anna. Anna's actually Tim's sister, and Tim was one of the guys there that night. My friend Jane's mom told my mom that she heard Joey was talking to lawyers. What do I think? Honestly, I don't know what to think. So,
I remember that the driver was black, but not African American. He was like actually from Africa. I'm sorry, I don't really remember specifically what he looked like. If I saw him again, I might recognize him. Is there any way we could track him down or something? I mean, don't they have to submit a log or submit the starting and ending points of the trip or whatever? Because I don't really remember specifically what he looked like. Okay, he had really, really dark skin and no facial hair and a shaved head. And he might have been in his 40s maybe. And I remember he was playing music really, really loud. And Tim asked him to turn it down a little. But the guy just completely ignored him.
What's up? Okay, well, it's off now.
So it was Tim, Luke, me, and then George. And sort of in order for us to all fit in comfortably, I sort of slung my leg over George's.
Nothing?
But it was nothing. I mean, my dress was still completely covering me.
Just, like looking at Facebook and stuff? Okay, can you shut the door? What?
What were we doing?
Why, what's she doing?
Just hanging out and...
I mean, is she yelling at Dad or is she just crying again?
It wasn't...
What do you want her to do? This is just like
bad right
Tim.
away.
She loves you, so it's just bad. How am I looking at you? No, I'm not. No, I haven't. I haven't at all, Tim. It's just like the past 3 weeks, all I've done is go to school, pick up Thea, and come home, and you guys are like huddled in the kitchen or somewhere, and I'm not a part of any of it. Okay, well then come in and shut the door. No, it's just that, Tim, you're my brother, and I'm really worried about you.
I don't know exactly how I should say everything. You know, I think about it all the time, constantly. Saying it out loud is just...
Did you do it? Yes, no, I know what you said. No, of course I believe you, but if you didn't do anything, then why were you fucking arrested? And like now you're on academic probation.
I should say all the details, or?
So tell me then, just tell me. Because Mom and Dad know all the details and the lawyers do, but I don't know anything and I'm at school all day, you know, like hearing all of this stuff and we haven't even talked about it. Okay, so tell me then.
So we were sort of dancing in the back and George was keeping the beat on my leg. And I know that sounds weird. He was sort of like playing the drums on my leg.
How Joey gets when she's drunk.
And then George and I started to sort of make out for a second, but that was only for like a second. And then he kind of started to put his hand up my leg.
I also know how you guys get when you're drunk.
But, you know, I slapped it away like in a friendly way. Except he did it again, except this time his hand sort of went up my skirt and like grazed my crotch a little. And I started to get sort of nervous and I clamped down on his hand with my hands and I looked at him and he was looking past me at Luke with this face on. And I don't really know how to describe the face exactly, but it was sort of like, hey dude, look what I'm doing. And I looked at him and I said, George, come on, stop. Just wait until we get to Connor's. I mean, I'm not sure I said stop exactly, but it was very clear that I wanted him to stop. I mean, I was trying to pull my leg off of his and push his hand off of me, but I mean, he was grabbing my skin. He was like clawing it. I don't know. I don't know if I would have done anything with him at Connors. I was just saying that. No, I was just saying that so he would stop doing that stuff in the cab. It seemed like a pretty good idea at the time.
Nothing. Sorry, no, nothing. I'm just picturing her, you know? Okay, so what happened next?
So the next thing I know, Luke is grabbing my other leg and sort of pulling it to the side. So my legs would be more like open. And then George kind of put his leg over mine to kind of hold it down. And then they both just started pushing their shoulders into my shoulders against the back of the seat, like sort of like that. And I started to cry at that point. And I mean, I could barely move, and they were pinning me down. And then George just started to pull my dress up and just pull it up farther. Sorry, how much detail do you need?
I hate thinking of her struggling because, you know, George and Luke are so much bigger than her. You know, I would have been beside myself hysterical if I was being pinned down by the two of them. I would have been screaming like a psycho or something. I don't get them.
And then George just really aggressively, like, pulled my underwear to the side and jammed his 2 fingers in me.
That's disgusting. So what did you do? What did you do when they started doing that to her?
I mean, I was crying at that point. I was hysterically crying, but I couldn't scream. I could not make a scream come out of me. It felt like I was choking.
And the cab driver didn't notice anything?
I mean, there's a good chance he didn't hear anything. You know, I remember the music was really loud. I said that, but I remember I was staring so hard into the rearview mirror, kind of just wondering if he would catch my eye, but I was horrified at the thought. I mean, I was so embarrassed, and my vagina was completely exposed, and I kept thinking, if this guy turns around and sees me like this, we're gonna get in a car accident.
Why didn't you stop the cab?
George had his fingers in me. 2. Yeah, I'm sure. Because I saw them. He was sort of moving them in and out, I guess, like in a stabbing motion. And I mean, he was really putting his whole body into it, and I was sort of squeezing everything, trying to close myself up, which probably made it hurt a lot more. And the whole time, Luke is making fun of George because I'm not coming, because I'm not having an orgasm. And he was like, dude, do you even know what the fuck you're doing? You make girls cry, you're so bad at that shit. You're giving this poor girl fucking pussy burn. And George was like, fuck you, dude, it's not me. Her pussy's as dry as a fucking desert. And then Luke sort of laughed, and then he put his fingers in his mouth. And I started to freak out because I knew what he was gonna do, and I started to really go crazy. And then that's when George said, I quote, "I feel like we're fucking wrestling an alligator or some shit."
Did he seriously say that?
I need a second. Yeah, so George said the alligator thing, and Luke laughed, and then he just did the same thing as George, except he was trying to, like, show off. And he was like, come on, Joey, I know you want to come. I know you're wet now. And then he seemed to get sort of tired or annoyed with me. And he was like, wow, I guess you're all talk, huh, Joey? And then they let go of me.
I hate them.
I hate them whenever I think about it.
You know, that is the most disgusting thing I've ever heard. And I don't understand. She said no, right?
Yeah, I said no through the whole thing. I was like, come on, no, don't, stop, I don't want to do this.
So what were you doing?
Tim was just looking out the window.
Well, why didn't you do anything? You sat there, Tim. You didn't text anybody. You didn't stop the cab. You didn't even say anything to them. I'm like, what the hell are you guys doing? Stop. But you were a part of it. You were there while your two best friends were doing crazy shit to a girl you've known your whole life, and she clearly wasn't into it.
I really don't want him to get in a lot of trouble for all this because he's actually a really good guy and he works really hard. And honestly, he probably just didn't know what to do, and that's not totally his fault. And mainly, he's the twin brother of one of my best friends, Anna. I haven't really talked to her since this.
I mean, you looked at your phone and you stared out the fucking window. Why? Maybe you were drunker than you thought.
I'm sorry, I actually don't feel very well.
Because you know her, Tim. She's one of my best friends. She's gone, like, camping with us.
How much longer is this gonna be?
You're right. I really don't get it. Were you afraid they were gonna hurt you or something? Because, you know, like, I know what they're like when they're drunk. Okay, so do you remember that time when we were in Brooklyn and Luke took that rock from in front of the church on Clinton Street and just smashed it into the window of the car? You know, he was out of control. Do you think he was gonna do something like that to you?
No, I'm fine to keep going.
So then tell me, because you're my brother and I know you better than anybody, right? And I just keep thinking about Thea, Tim, and how we would literally kill anybody who did anything close to that to her. I mean, just picture her. You know, not knowing what to do, and then feeling so scared and so trapped. And that's how Joey felt. And you didn't do anything to help her, so that's why this thing is like a fucking nightmare to me or something, because you're not that guy.
The last thing I remember seeing was Columbus Circle Mall.
I know what happened fast.
And then we were at 78th and Lexington.
No, I won't. Please tell me.
I didn't get out. I should have, I didn't know what to do. My underwear was ripped and I was sore and I just stared at the taxi TV. They were trying to talk to me. They were sort of teasing me. And Luke like put his arm around me and said something like, "Come on, Joey, give me a hug. You're like the most down girl ever." And Tim was just staring out the window.
You didn't want to be a pussy.
The cab pulled up at Connor's and I threw $10.
That's totally fucked. And I believe you, Tim, and I love you a lot, okay? But you have to know that's totally fucked. Guys don't do that to other guys.
Yeah, I locked myself in the bathroom. We got up there and I puked everywhere.
Because so what if they called you a pussy? Like, what would have happened? Would you have lost them as friends? Would you have died? Okay, so then don't be a pussy, Tim.
Jane helped me. She gave me her underwear and we called my parents and I got home around 10:30ish.
Why would the lawyer say that?
I told my parents. They were really good about it. My mom put my underwear in a Ziploc bag because I guess she thought there was evidence on them. And my dad cried, which really made me cry.
But that stuff doesn't matter because you know they did it.
They're just disappointed.
Yes, Tim, more than anything, I obviously want what's gonna be best for you. I just don't understand how that's right, though. Yeah, Mom? Yeah, he's right here. Okay, yeah, we're coming. I hate our family like this. Go. Yeah, I'm coming. I'm just realizing I'm probably never gonna talk to Joey again, right?
"10 to 15 minutes. Everything happened in only like 10 to 15 minutes. That's how long it took for my life to just implode. And now I'm slutty girl who shouldn't have been there and I shouldn't have gotten drunk and I shouldn't have done everything that everybody's saying that I shouldn't have done. But how is it about everything that I shouldn't have done? And now I'm that girl. And I don't want to be.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to read something that I wrote for this book. I wrote it last year about something that happened to me in 6th grade. You watch porn? Lenny asks me with one of his very signature smiles, the kind of smile that almost makes you feel bad. I don't really want to answer Lenny's question. Talking about porn makes me uncomfortable. I start to feel tense. Plus, there's a bunch of other guys in the room. It's 6th grade, and I just started hanging out with this new group of kids. We're at Julian's house, and I'm sitting on the couch with Julian, Jake, Steven, and Aaron. Lenny is sitting on a chair, staring at me with his smile, waiting for an answer. He probably knows I don't really want to talk about it, but that doesn't matter much to him. He wants his answer, so he repeats himself. Do you watch porn? I started watching porn mid-year 5th grade. I just begun middle school and befriended a lot of kids in 7th and 8th grade, and sometimes when I hung out with them, they'd make jokes about the porn they watched referencing certain sites. After a little bit, I decided to Google some of these sites and was pretty shocked. Obviously, I wasn't shocked because the videos contained breasts, vaginas, and penises. I expected that. I was shocked because these videos seemed to take place in their very own world with their own rules and mentality. I'd entered a world where instead of referring to the women by name, they're referred to by this combination of their hair color, skin color, and the added word slut or whore. I'd entered a world where every girl is recorded saying she wants it and craves cum. It was a world where after each girl was fucked, she would blow a kiss to the camera and the screen would fade to black, happily ever after. This seemingly simplistic dehumanization of sex that would always end with the girl being told how dirty she was and never anybody else involved. It was a strange world, and even then I knew I wasn't really on board with most of it, but I still continued to watch. And lots of days after coming home from school, I'd watch porn. It was like marathoning this awful TV show where you feel a strange addictiveness while watching and then like crap when you finish. I thought it'd be easier to not actually think about what I was watching when I watched it, and decided I'd separate my normal self from my porn watching self completely. I was very secretive about it, telling nobody. This was the opposite for guys like Lenny and Julian. So many days after school, I sat and listened to them describe the porn they watched, or even sometimes what other guys watched. I remember Julian saying to me, "Yo, Lenny likes big girls. He was watching videos of these fat hoes," and then laugh. And so Lenny repeats his question. He's still looking at me, and he's getting kind of angry that I haven't answered him yet. I kind of mumble, "Yeah, I've watched it a few times." He laughs, the kind of laugh that you know is at you. It's the answer he wanted. Around 4 months later, I'm in the schoolyard talking to Julian, and Julian says how he really doesn't like Lenny anymore. He lists a couple of incidents where Lenny came to his house and wrecked his things. Also, the thing with Jessica, Julian says. What thing, I ask him. He said 2 months ago, he, Steven, and Lenny went to Jessica's house, a girl who goes to her school. Lenny started getting wild, and he put his penis on Jessica's leg. She was sitting in her own house, just hanging out with a bunch of kids who she thought were her good friends. And Lenny took his penis and he slapped it on her because he felt like it, while Steven and Julian stood and watched. As shocking as everything was, the reactions were maybe the most shocking. I overheard kids saying how Jessica had made it up, and some girls in our school said she must have wanted it to happen. A group of 8th graders were high-fiving Lenny in the hallway, laughing and smiling. I still remember one of them nodding at Lenny, saying, "Nice." What's scary is, as much as one can wish to separate themselves from what they watch or attempt to not analyze or question anything that happens in those videos, it's impossible because it overlaps into our culture. The world of porn bleeds its way into reality. The she-wanted-it mentality of porn makes its way into the opinions of 13-year-olds, even when it's so obvious that she definitely did not want it. An objectification of women does not stay within the confines of a video. It does not fade away like a video's final shot. Permanent harm is done. Because the most accessible way that guys of all ages view sex should not encourage a male-female dynamic. That's degrading and unreal. But that's the main thing that's out there at the click of your mouse. And it's scary, and it's unfortunate, and it's unfair for everybody involved. And it's even more frightening how these cycles continue. Guys like Lenny keep on coming because guys like Lenny keep on understanding sex as something that they can win or take, because that's how it's being presented to them. Lenny learns to not be empathetic around sex. It can be something he's entitled to, and something where the sole purpose is to please himself in whatever way he wants. And so many of us are so uncomfortable with sex or rape that we blind ourselves to what's going on and we let it continue. It's been over 2 years since everything happened. I'm in 8th grade now, and I didn't realize how everything connected until I first saw Slut. I didn't even realize how much Jessica must have had to go through the whole time. She felt ashamed for being a victim and walked through the hallways of my school as if nothing had happened. I also don't hang out with Julian and all those guys anymore. Recently, in school though, we had family living class, and I had to sit right next to Lenny. As a class, we started addressing scary incidents, and one girl shared about a time when she was harassed by a stranger on the street who told her she had a cute butt. Lenny couldn't stop giggling. I turned to look at him, and I saw on Lenny's face one of his very signature smiles. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Audley. I'm just going to read a testimony I wrote over a year ago about how I've witnessed the media portraying women. When I was a little kid, starting at about 7 years old, I loved to listen to music and watch music videos. I loved hip hop, R&B, a little bit of rap, pop, rock, basically everything. As long as it was catchy, I loved it. I would sing along to these songs, having no clue what the artists were singing and rapping about. I would watch the music videos and see nothing but African American women in bikinis, having a good time and getting attention from lots of guys. One of the songs I really enjoyed was Big Pimpin' by Jay-Z. Damn, that cruise ship looked fun. All the beautiful women, their amazing swimsuits, smiling, dancing around the men while champagne was being poured on their faces. I mean, it seemed like a great time to me at the time. I was a young girl just dancing to the beat, drooling over the glamorous lifestyle and laughing, completely unaware of what was really being said. As I got older, I started to listen to the lyrics and I began to understand what was being said. Just recently, I was watching Throwback Jams on MTV and I heard a familiar beat. I looked up at the TV and it was Big Pimpin', big and bold on my TV. I got up, started dancing and rapping with Hova. You know why I fuck 'em, love 'em, leave 'em. I love this song so much. Yeah, I got up and started rapping with Hova. You know why I thug 'em, fuck 'em, love 'em, leave 'em, 'cause I don't fucking need 'em. Take 'em out the hood, keep 'em looking good, but I don't fucking feed 'em. First time they fuss, I'm breezing, talking about what's the reason. I'm a pimp in every sense of the word, bitch. Better trust and believe 'em. I was suddenly like, okay, whoa. That's kind of messed up. But kept jamming to the song. Then I heard Heart Cold as Assassin. I got no passion, I got no patience, and I hate waiting. Ho, get your ass in the car and let's ride. You know, everybody know that part. I stopped and thought, ho. I looked up at the TV to make sure these women in the video reacted to what was just said, but no, they just kept dancing. I sat back down and wondered, did anyone hear this but me? And the song continued to play. It wasn't until the end of the song that I realized this whole entire thing was about spending money, playing women, and abusing women, and treating them less as human beings. Pimping women, basically. The lucky women in this video, the lucky women in these videos are just things, toys, scenery, not people. Their self-worth is completely diminished. Yeah, it's okay to be sexy, but in these videos, the women have no control. Girls are taught to want to be like these women because, come on, who wouldn't want to be partying with Jay-Z on his badass yacht, right? And what guy doesn't want to be jiggled with a rap career and cash and bottles of Cristal and a boat full of half-naked sluts, right? There is a very unhealthy male-to-female dynamic being modeled in these videos by celebrities we worship. In the media, African-American women are often portrayed as voluptuous and sexual with ratchet ghetto attitudes and 3 baby daddies. And music videos pack the biggest punch against these women of color. Instead of rapping about our beauty and our strength, male recording artists are calling us sexy bitches and fine-ass hoes. Instead of showing us affection, they're pouring alcoholic beverages on our faces, throwing cash at us, telling us to play with the dick in the truck. As an African-American woman, I have to stand up and fight against this. I should not have to feel like I have to mimic the women in these videos to get attention from boys I like. And boys should not expect us to be and act the same way. Maybe if the media didn't portray us as hoes, bitches, big booty Judies, or sluts, we would get a little more respect and have a little more room to just be who we are. Thank you.
I am Emily Mortimer, and I'm an actor and a writer and various things, but I'm also a mother, and as a parent of a 5-year-old daughter, and perhaps more importantly, an 11-year-old son, I was just incredibly drawn to Katie and Meg's amazing project. These two are the forces behind this whole thing, and the two ladies who have teased this incredible stuff out of their students and got this project off the ground, and it's become this thing that's this little engine that could now, and they've taken it all over the country and have used it as a tool for education everywhere. Anyway, but I wanted to find out more when I heard about it, and I wanted to be more educated about teenage gender politics and sexuality and what really goes on between young men and young women. But as I talked to Katie and read more of this book, I realized that it's not just my children who can benefit from an open discussion about these things. I can too, and I'm 43, and I do feel, and I've felt it more and more as I've heard these stories and read the book and talked to these guys, that as an educated, liberated woman in 2015 with a career and an independent income, and it turns out that I'm still just as confused about these issues as I was when I was 14 and 15. And that I'm still struggling with how to square the need to be strong and driven, a strong and driven woman, and with a need to be desired and to desire, and how to keep a sense of who I am and what it is that I really want through all of this. Sex is confusing for everyone, not just for teenagers. And I think the more we're all encouraged to talk about what confuses us, the better we'll understand each other and the better we'll understand ourselves. In the afterword to the book, Carol Gilligan talks about wanting the discussion about sex and morality to be about what women really think, as opposed to what we think we should think. And I love that Katie and Meg and all these brilliant, brave, honest, talented young people who have put on this play and shared their stories and helped to write this book have encouraged us and continue to encourage us to understand what we really think and to say it. So thank you so much, guys. And I think they are going to answer some questions that I'm going to start off by asking. and then if you guys have anything that you'd like to ask them, then, start brainstorming now as to what they might be. But first of all, Katie and Meg, so Slut started off as a play and then evolved into this whole sort of student activist movement, and now it's this book. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey and the story of Slut?
Yeah. So Meg and I founded an arts and activism project called The Artifact 8 years ago. And the goal of that project is to bring young people together to create plays based on the challenges that they face in their lives. A dynamic component of our project is an all-girl theater company. The girls are 11 to 20 years old, and Slut came out of their lives. We were sitting around talking like we always do, and the word slut, the idea of slut shaming, sexuality, sexual aggression, rape, was popping up in every single conversation we had with them, and we meet with them once a week for 3 hours, and it was all we could talk about. So we knew it was something that we needed to dive into, so we spent 1.5 years improving, creative writing, reflective writing, having more and more discussions. Sometimes we just sit there and talk for 3 hours about every possible way we could tackle this issue, and then we had a script, and
Yeah, and the first time we actually performed the play was part of an international theater festival here in New York City. And after the performances, we were so struck by the fact that the audiences would just stand in the street. It was hundreds of people standing in the street of New York City, and they wouldn't want to leave because they wanted to keep talking. And so we realized that there was quite a need to have this conversation and that people wanted it. So we created then the StopSlut Coalition, the StopSlut movement, to help fulfill this need. And we now have hundreds of chapters, thousands of members all throughout the country. We have 20 chapters here alone in New York City that are comprised of students, young people, ages, our youngest is 11 to 20 years old, and they're the experts. So they're the ones that understand the nuances of how this culture is affecting them, and they are creating their own individual plans of action for how they can combat slut shaming and rape culture in their communities.
Yeah, so when the Feminist Press came to us about a year ago and said, would you be interested in putting a book together? And the book would contain the script and essays by young people, also essays by leading activists and writers, and then an activism guide, we jumped on the chance because our goal has always been to provide young people and also their educators, their parents, those in their lives with tools to safely unpack issues and effectively take action. And for us, theater and storytelling has always been the way in. Yeah. So that's where we are.
That's what we did.
Winnifred, you've been part of this project since the very beginning, and I wondered if you could help us to understand what slut shaming is and how it can lead to rape.
Yeah, slut shaming is a way to target female sexuality to demean and degrade a woman's self-worth. And in terms of like the perpetuation of rape culture, I think because it sort of hijacks a woman's right to own her sexuality and display it in whatever way she wants or feels comfortable with, we then take away, her power, and then we as a culture have consistently used it and used the word slut to delegitimize the experiences of victims and survivors. So yeah, when you take away like a woman's standing and power in terms of her sexuality, she is then, vulnerable to be a victim.
And as young girls in 2015, how do you sort of reconcile the confusing issues of how to be a sort of sexual, fully realized being in the world, as well as how to keep hold of your power, and these, especially when there is so much. There's so much in our culture that is telling you to flaunt yourselves and that there is power in that. I mean, I find it confusing. I find Miley Cyrus really confusing because on the one hand, I think, that's fantastic that this girl is feeling free enough to be that way and sort of owning her sexuality in that way. But on the other hand, it's confusing, and I wonder how you guys live with that as young women in the world, and how you kind of deal with that in your own brains.
Yeah, I think like you said, it's really, really challenging to answer that. I think walking the line is probably one of my greatest challenges in the last couple of years. Because yeah, as you said, you want to be sexual, that's natural. And you have these conflicting messages. We hear about them all the time, where on one side, everyone's telling you, yeah, no, everyone wants this. We want you to like act this way. We want you to reveal yourself, like do it. And then you're getting shamed for it. So I think I've personally found it nearly impossible to like negotiate that. But I think part of it is taking away the stigma instead of like saying, proudly reclaiming, yeah, you know what, I am a slut. Like, I have a right to own my sexuality as a woman, and I should be able to do that without having to claim this word, which is essentially degrading. Right. So I feel like being able to confidently discuss these issues has enabled me with tools to sort of have more of internal understanding. So I can't really change what other people are doing or saying about me, but if I have like a sense of self, and I do, a lot of it is because of this group, then I am able to combat it.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And I think what I feel like from hearing you all and reading the book is that there's, in a way, what you're owning is the complexity of it and the confusion of it, and that's so much of an important part of the discussion, is that it's not like everything is going to be made clear. It's just that you're owning that these are difficult. This is difficult territory, and it needs to be talked about in as honest way as possible. Okay, cool. Now, Eliza and Darcy, you've both travelled with the play across the country, and I just wondered how people have responded, how audiences have responded in the different places that you've been to the play.
Yeah, so I remember the first time we put this on in like August 2013, I had a friend come to see it, and, you know, she called other girls sluts, and, you know, like when guys would call her sloppy, she would just giggle and, you know, laugh it off. And I remember she saw this play, and it like changed her whole outlook on everything, because like now she's one of the biggest feminists I know, and she would never, you know, it changes her outlook, and it makes her think twice about like what guys say to her and how she should like, you know, how she should respond. And like, you know, my mom's friends also like remembered their childhood or teenagehood. And I have a 14-year-old brother, and I think watching his reaction was the most powerful to me, because, you know, like he called girls sluts, and he talked about like, the word pimp a lot. And then he saw this, and it really like, you know, changed his view of the world, because he was able to, you know, really think about it and go into school and talk to his friends and like stand up for this, you know, cause. And I think that was so powerful, because he was young and a boy, and you don't see that as often, but like, and that's how it's happened everywhere we've been.
Yeah, like Eliza said, seeing all of the reactions after the shows have been so powerful. Almost a year ago, we went to Fargo, North Dakota to do a couple shows, and we also had a StopSlut meeting at one of the local high schools, and something that I will never forget is after one of the shows, we have a talk back where the cast will come on stage, and we have the ability to have an open conversation with the audience. And we had this one girl who was 16 or 17, and she stood up in front of everyone, and she was crying and she was shaking, and she told us that she came to the realization after seeing the show that an experience that she had had a couple months before was rape, and she didn't fully comprehend the magnitude of the issue until seeing Slut. And when she came forward and, you know, she talked about her truth and her experience, a handful of other women also came forward from the audience and told their stories. And what was really incredible is that we had a lot of high school students in the audience also that night. And the next day we went to their high school, and they all came, and we sat down for 3 or 4 hours and just had a conversation with them. And they were very strong, because they saw how this had affected their peers, and they wanted to make a change. So we sat and we had a conversation, and they came up with the plan that they were having their prom the next weekend, and they decided that when the song Blurred Lines came on, they were all gonna try and get as many people as they could to walk off the dance floor. And we were flying back to New York, and I remember I got off the plane, I turned my phone on, and I got a text from one of the girls from Fargo, and she texted me, "Oh my gosh, Darcy, you'll never guess what happened. So we had our prom, and half of our grade walked off the dance floor when Blurred Lines came on." And that was just, it made me so proud seeing the impact that Slut has, because when you provide people with the space and with the platform to have these conversations, they're ready to have the conversations, and they're ready to take action.
And I love how a lot of the conversations seem to be between boys and girls, and that boys seem to be very interested in having the conversation too, because they're just as confused as the girls are. And Fred is our brave boy who shared his story so eloquently and so brilliantly. And I'd love to know, you know, what you think about the importance of guys being part of this movement and all that.
I mean, yeah, so obviously everybody is involved with it, meaning that for the movement to work, everyone should be involved in it. So it's like there's pressures on both ends, and there's limitations on both ends. I mean, if I go to a party, I don't want to feel like I have to make the first move every time, or like if I'm walking with a friend of mine, and then like someone walks by, I don't feel like I have to say to prove to him, oh, she's hot or something. Like, it doesn't. The way that it works is that, like, I think with this whole, because we're all talking about conversation, and that's what's important, at least in this point. Like, the first thing is just to talk, to be able not to even say, oh, it should be this or it should be that, but to just say, my personal reaction to this is this, and, you know, a real experience. And so many people, there's just, it's built in this hesitation to do that, and it's built in this way to, like, kind of not have to, you don't want to talk about it, and it's really hard to make that jump to consciousness, to be like, hey, let's have this conversation. I don't know, I mean, I was like really nervous to even do this, because it's Google and like it's on YouTube or whatever, and it's kind of but still, the reason that I wrote that was because I saw the play, and it's this thing where, like, we're not telling people we shouldn't be telling people what to think. We should just say, this is my experience, and once you do, that's empowering to other people to then be able to talk about it. So I think it really involves everybody, yeah.
Awesome. So let's ask, have you guys got questions?
Yes.
That's why you're standing there. Yeah. So ask away.
Sorry, this is how we usually do it, but I don't think we ever said that. So. But thank you guys so much for being here. It was a really powerful performance, and the readings were great. Kind of on that last point, I struggle with this issue because I feel like people who elect to come to these events are people who already get it. How do you get people who don't get it yet to come in? Eliza, I loved your story about your brother. That's so powerful. And Fred, was it? Yeah. That I love that you're here too. And how do we get more allies in?
You know, it's interesting because we had the same conversation, and it is definitely one of the reasons why we titled our play Slut. Lots of high school kids want to see a play called Slut. It's not like Joey's Bad Night where things went wrong. Like, you know, not to lighten it, but when we had early conversations about what the hell we should title this play, we're like, let's pack a punch here. Let's get the kids in. And we also find the key is just inviting them. Like, seriously, Fred's the lone guy here today, obviously meeting on the stage, but there are so many boys that are in this audience. The audience, without fail, is always 50-50 male-female. Boys come out to this play. They want to talk about this play. They want to talk about the issues. And we found it's just a matter of sending them a text and in Facebook inviting them. And, you know, the girls get on their phones and they get on Snapchat and they're just inviting everybody. And they actually show up because it's the thing to do Saturday night. No, it's weird. It's like this feminist play has become the thing to do on a Friday night. And it's also one of the schools that we're going to. We're doing a workshop at a high school here in New York City, and he's awesome. The dean of the school was like, "Oh no, it's just we're going to force them. Like everyone's just going to be required to go because that's the way to get it going. You know, it's just you kind of have to be dragged, and then you realize you actually like it, and then conversation starts. So,
and also speaking for myself, I think that everybody needs educating about this more than they think they do. Yes. Even the people who think that they're think they understand it. Like I would think that I would be somebody that would be, you know, very sort of open-minded about all this stuff. But I realized in talking to Katie that there's so much that I still don't know and still don't understand about sexual politics, gender politics, about what really goes on between boys and girls. Yeah. And I think that I think if that's true for me, it must be true for loads of people.
Yeah. And I think the other thing Winnie, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and that's also the great thing about it being theater. Like, it's not, you know, a lecture about slut shaming and sexual shaming. It's not really preaching to the choir when it's a really magnificent, entertaining piece of theater that people should want to see whether they're, you know, educated about the issue or not. And I think that that's what we've seen a lot. A lot of people come to see the show because, you know, it's a great show. It is. Yeah. And I find that especially a lot of the girls that come to see it really identify with it like wholeheartedly. And then interestingly, when the boys come to see it, it's a lot more like they're always a little bit more like shaken up when it's over. I know that my friends that have come to see it who are boys, like when I have to, it's always like weird between us after they see it. They're like, they feel like they want to like hug me, but they don't want to touch me. But like, and I remember I once had like one of my closest male friends come to see it, and he was like, and he like didn't know what to say to me sort of, and I was like, well, like, what did you think? Like, how was it? And he was like, I feel some type of way. And I was like, oh, like, okay. And he was like, I just need to think for a while. Like, it was, I don't know. So I find that like a lot of people that come to see it have that reaction.
Exactly. And I think we got like some serious street cred too because we didn't water it down, and that's because of these guys. Like, there was no way we weren't going to say fuck, and there was no way we weren't going to say pussy, and there was no way we weren't going to actually describe what actually happens to a girl when she's being violated. Like, we're not gonna pull punches on that because then it's enough already. Like, people are pulling punches too much. So that, I think that sort of, it started to spread that we were like actually going there.
And then also this idea then once they're in there, how to get it is if you do it in this very real way, it's based on this idea that I actually think is true. Like once you see something, you're gonna understand more about what's going through, and you're gonna have more empathy, and you're gonna learn, not if someone's telling you a thesis or like telling you this is the way, but by feeling art and like having, it's an advantage to art as activism, in that like once you come here, you understand what they're going through, and then it just makes more sense that way.
Yeah. And it gives us a permission to share stories that we often don't hear, right? So like for the first time, we actually get to hear from Joey, the survivor, victim of rape, when so often in these circumstances that are happening in real life, whether in Steubenville, right, or other cases around the country that we hear about all the time, we don't get to hear from the survivor for a number of reasons, right? And this time theater gives us a chance to actually hear her voice, to hear what actually happened, to have to look at her in the face and see the reality of how this is affecting her. It changes you.
Next question.
Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for making this. My niece turns 11 this week. Emily, you mentioned 11-year-old son, I believe. The idea, like you mentioned, 11 to 20, for your chapters and for your group, that's your target age. The idea that an 11-year-old has to stand up for herself, or an 11-year-old boy has to be educated about things he says, or what his friends are saying, like that just it makes me sad, it makes me mad. Could you just talk a little bit about how you craft your message and your program to kids so young, where you talked about the girl, was it North Dakota or another, where she realized what had happened to her, had been raped, and Fred, in your piece, you talked about like guys were talking about porn at school, and you had to go on Google and be like, oh, so if you could just talk a little bit about that, that would be helpful.
Yeah. I think we have to acknowledge that 11-year-olds do know what the word slut is, or a variation of that, that it is affecting them. And we have to be realistic about that. So we actually have a 6th grader who's 11. She's one of our youngest StopSlut coalition members. And she has a friend who was going out with a boy, and they were, holding hands. And then she decided she didn't want to go out with him anymore. And so the boy got really upset. And he got the rest of his peers in the class to start calling her a thought. And on the playground, they started going, thought alert, thought alert, thought alert, every time she walked around. And a thought, in case you don't know, is that hoe over there. So it's another derivation of slut. And the girl was devastated, and she's 11. So we can't say that 11-year-olds aren't being impacted by this culture, right? It's slightly maybe different than what high school students are facing, but they are experiencing the ramifications of this. And so we have to be willing and courageous enough to talk about that reality.
And what's so amazing is that we hear this from middle school students all the time, and actually from kids as you know in 5th grade and 4th grade, obviously, and what's always fascinating to us is how the school handles it. So the girl will go and be like, they're saying thought alert, or like, I'm a whore according to James in my class, and I don't know what to do. And these teachers are always like, well, James, you know, that is really inappropriate, and I need you to say you're sorry. And never, ever do they sit and have a conversation about why calling this girl a thought or a whore or a slut is inappropriate. This word inappropriate gets thrown around in middle school like you would not believe, and no one asks the question why. So what we do in our program is everything is about why. So every time we say something, it's about why. So when Winnifred was talking about can girls reclaim the word slut? Well, when we first started developing this play, we did experiment with that possibility, and then we kept asking the question why. And we started to realize, well, no, we can't, because no matter what, it always backfires. It just, without fail, backfires. And so what we need schools to start doing is letting the kids talk, actually hearing what they're saying, not telling them things are inappropriate, and actually then like digging deep and unpacking it and having a conversation about why. Yeah. Why do you think you call her that? Where does a 6th grade boy learn to call this girl a thought? Does he even know what that means? No.
Right. And it's all the adults in their lives, right? So their teachers, but also their parents and their uncles and their aunts and, you know, religious leaders and whoever the adults are in their lives, taking them seriously. It's like we were saying before, they're the experts. Like, they really do understand. Young people are smart and they understand what's going on in their lives. And so we have to be able to give them the platform to be able to speak honestly and truthfully and know that we're not going to judge them. We're not going to look down on them, but we're going to actually listen and then help give them the tools that they need to create the change that they want.
Ask a 6th grader or 5th grader that you know, or 4th grader, or maybe even a 3rd grader, if they've ever heard the word slut or whore or hoe, and they will tell you yes. Except no one's ever asking them.
Right.
No one's asking kids that age, right? So that's a part of the problem. And when you get to the high school level, high schools don't want to talk about slut shaming. They don't want to talk about rape culture. They'll talk about bullying, but they won't talk about this because this involves sex. And no one wants to think that kids this age are engaging in sex, because God forbid, right?
Next question.
Hi, that was really fantastic, impressive, and I'm really excited about these stories of change in places that you've been going and doing this play. It's great to hear. I don't suspect you have an Australian tour coming up anytime soon.
We'd love it.
Yeah,
we'd love
make
it.
that happen.
Make some connections.
So similar to the last question, I have a 10-year-old sister, and I'm terrified of her going to high school in a couple of years and having to deal with the immense social pressures from girls, from boys, from adults, from music videos, from the way we market toys to children. It's disgusting. And so I'm wondering, do you guys have recommendations on how to talk to young girls about this and to make sure that they understand all the support they have?
Going to ask oddly that question because I didn't get to ask my question earlier to her. I was going to say the same thing. What would you tell your sort of 10-year-old self, or, you know, about to enter into big school, about how would you prepare her for?
First thing I'll tell myself is it's not fun to have champagne poured in your face. The first thing I would have really took my time to like repeat to myself is be yourself. You don't have to, like, often girls do most things because other girls are doing it or they want a guy's attention. And the big thing is you have to be yourself. Whether you like dancing or like twerking around, then go ahead and do it. But like, don't do it to get somebody's attention, you know? Just be yourself 100%. And that's what we need to remember most of the time.
I mean, just growing up as a teen in this generation with all of these influences of media that have been surrounding us, there's a really huge dichotomy between being a sexual person and being a smart person, right? So you can either be a really empowered person who loves your body, or you can be a smart person. And you can't, they've made it so that you can't be both. And by they, I mean society, because you can either be really sexual, but if you can embrace your sexuality, but if you embrace it, then you can be a slut, or you can be somewhat more conservative, but if you're more conservative, then you're a prude. And there are just so many ways where you can be one, but then you can't be the other. And what I would tell younger me, and what I'm still even telling myself now, is that I can embrace both. You know, so you can tell your 11-year-old sister that it's okay to feel good about yourself and to feel good about your body, and you can also be smart. So just embrace it and don't let other people tell you that what you're doing is wrong.
Can I quickly say also about the word slut in particular? I mean, for me, like the first time I remember someone calling me a slut, I was probably 10 or 11. And at the time, there was no sexual connotation, really. I mean, it was really disassociated, because honestly, now for me, there isn't really that either. It has always been a word that is used to dehumanize, degrade, and demean someone, make someone feel like trash, and that is its effect, regardless of, you know, your sexual history. I mean, when I was 10, I had never kissed a boy, but the word felt really bad. So I think that's how you address it with young people. Like, they know that the word feels bad, and that's pretty much all there is to it. The reason why it feels bad is because it makes you feel worthless, and honestly, there is no other word like that. The word bitch, the word cunt, those words are nothing like the word slut, because to me, it's the only word that actually makes you feel like trash, and then therefore it becomes really problematic because you can do anything you want to trash without any consequences. So it's all like...
Yeah, and with like to be called even on the other side, like if you pussy or fag, or it doesn't mean, those don't mean what they mean. We're taking all this kind of like jealousy and this anger that we have, and we're putting it into something that's already so taboo that we don't know what it is, because like no one's talking about it, meaning that then, so then put this there, and then it gets, yeah.
And I think with your sister, so much of it is modeling too. I think people don't even realize how often they say this word, or how often they'll just be like, oh, she's like, why is she even acting like that? Like, she's such trash, or she's such a whore, or like, you know, we just do it so flippantly. And I think when you're around, I actually had this really cool chat with Fred's mom, and she was just like, oh shit, like and like making me realize all the things I said over the years that were like really degrading, and I'm doing it in front of my kid who's, you know, modeling his behavior off mine. And so much of what we see with kids slut-shaming one another, we see parents doing. Not kidding. We see parents doing it to other girls. You know, when the this play is based off a lot of real events, and in a particular event in this play, a mom that we're very close with, who prides herself on being a feminist, who we would agree is a really great person, came up to me and was like, oh, I mean, do you believe this girl? I mean, come on, she's such a slut. She's such a liar. And you're sitting there and you're just like, is she even thinking? And I know she said that to her daughter. I know her daughter told her friends. I know they're saying that at the PTA meeting for real. And so it's what we're modeling, you know? And it's also just bring up the word. Have you ever heard this word before? You know, have you ever heard, you know, these things before? And let her know that you're willing to have an open dialogue. Most kids don't feel like anyone's willing to talk about it with them. And if they do, it means they're bad. Especially girls. They always feel bad, like they're bad and dirty.
Next question.
So on the one hand, media like pornography or music videos like Big Pimpin', maybe they have some negative side effects from people watching too many of them. On the other hand, people have a right to free speech. So how do we maybe stop people from consuming as much media that is, you know, degrading to women or other people? Or like, what's the solution to that balance of free speech and negative side effects?
I definitely. So I wrote that like a year ago, and then they told me to read, and I was like also nervous because I was like, I don't want to tell people what not to make, and I'm like, there should be videos of people having sex online. Like, that should be something that someone can access and look at. I think it's not that we're telling, you know, Big Pimpin' not to be made. It's that the first step is we're not doing that. But we're exercising our free speech to say, personally, to me, this is what I think of that. So like whatever music video is made, we're not telling the writer they should, you know, write whatever they want and exercise that free speech as much as they want. It's just by doing that, we have the same free speech to say, that affected this thing in a way that I don't like how it looked. And then maybe if they heard that, and maybe if we like talked, they could still make it, but they have a different understanding of it. So it's like, we're not, in no way is it saying, stop doing this. It's just saying your very personal thing, like, this is how it affects me.
Yeah, or like you guys, the guys at the high school refusing to dance to Blurred Lines.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that they're not saying that shouldn't be published as a record, but we don't like the feeling of. But that was a really interesting one, I thought, that Blurred Lines video and the song, because there was something very kind of viscerally, weirdly appealing about it. Even as a woman, like, it was like, this guy was sort of being so overt in a way that was, you couldn't tell whether it was ironic or what it was, but there was something kind of, you were drawn to it. And I feel like the confusion around things like that is something that you guys and then when you think about it, you think, this is just horrible. I hate this song. I hate this video. But there's something very compelling about it at the same time, and no wonder it was a huge hit, because it appeals to some part of us that still hasn't been reconciled at all, and we're still very unreconstructed as a culture, even though we think we are. So I think that's an excellent question, and there we have an example of people actually thinking about this song and deciding to use their right to not dance to it.
Exactly, and I think that's the whole point. If we can have a space where we can actually stop for a second and not just have everything bombard us and be naive or not keeping our eyes open to how it's affecting us, right? That's part of the problem, is that it's just all coming at us so quickly, especially with social media, right? And like easy access to things like porn right now. You're not even aware of how it's affecting you. And so our position is oftentimes, okay, let's just stop for a second and have a conversation so that we can be more aware and make our own personal decision of if we want to continue to consume this or not.
Yeah, and I think also, like, with free speech comes responsibility. And you can technically say whatever you want to say, but with some knowledge of how it's affecting others is really important. And I think a lot of it, especially with porn, obviously it comes down to supply and demand. So it's less about changing like an artist's perspective or goal in producing his porn, but more about what we as a society value and, how we want to treat people. I mean, to me, like, the porn industry is like really specific, but I mean, I think it's the same thing with like music videos. I mean, it's a societal issue. So once we sort of change the energy of our culture, then naturally art changes.
Yeah. Thank you. Last two questions.
So thank you guys for coming today. I know you guys said that you brought the play to a bunch of different parts of the country, and some parts of the country are probably a lot more conservative about talking about sex and sex education, maybe for, whatever reasons, religious reasons. They might not go into it as in depth as some other schools in the country. So did you guys have an opportunity to visit kind of these more conservative areas? And if so, how were their reactions, and were they different depending on where you kind of visited throughout the country?
Well, when we went to Fargo, North Dakota, I mean, that's the Midwest, so it's pretty conservative. And before the show, we were talking to some of the teens that were waiting to go see the show, and we were talking about their sex ed classes. And in the city, I go to a New York City public school, and so we do have health ed, and we have started to talk about consent and about how to treat, your interaction with the opposite sex and stuff like that. And when I went to Fargo, I was talking to one of the girls, and I was talking to her, and I was asking her, I said, what's your sex ed class like? And she goes, well, actually, it's really funny that you ask me that, because a couple weeks ago in sex ed, we played a game called Who Slept in Your Bed? And what they did is they put a white sheet on the floor, and then everyone sat around the sheet, and they had little pictures of different characters, and there would be like Slutty Amanda or like Herpes Harry, and like all of these different things that were geared towards telling these students, don't have sex, because these are all of the things that's going to happen to you, right? You can be called a slut, or you can get an STD, and the way that it was constructed is that just don't have sex, because all of these bad things are going to happen to you. And what they don't do is they don't prepare students with the conversation, with the resources for those who do want to have sex. And so just when we went and we started having an open conversation with them, is that they were so eager to have these conversations about sexuality and about, slut shaming and about sex. And so I just think it was great that.
Yeah, I agree. And like before, we have a line earlier in the play that's like talking about how this woman's a Republican. And before we went to Fargo, we were considering changing it to like, oh, well, she's so conservative. And then, we didn't. And I thought that was so cool because like we didn't, okay, sorry. Because if we change it to conservative, we'd be like picking what their reactions were gonna be before we'd met them and before we'd seen their response to the play. And so I remember we were all like a little bit nervous before were they gonna like it? Like, were they gonna laugh? Were they gonna be emotional? And it was so powerful. That was like the most powerful place I'd been a part of the play because they reacted just like they reacted in New York and LA, and even more so because they don't have the same opportunities to witness theater like we do or like you guys do, or to talk about it openly. And so it didn't really matter that we had Republican in there or we were talking about sex because like everybody goes through the same things, and it was just so beautiful to give them that opportunity.
I think like we as New Yorkers also like underestimate people like all over the rest of the world. Like they're actually not that bad. Like I remember going there and being like, oh my God, North Dakota, like they're pilgrims. I don't know like what's gonna happen. And I got there, and I mean my part in particular is pretty racy, and there was like, it was straight faces, like enthusiasm. People loved it. It was the same exact way as it was here, as it was in LA.
Yeah. We were warned too before we went. They were like, listen, just prepare. There's gonna be picketing. They are gonna hate you. This is just feminist propaganda. And we're like, oh my God, like, it's gonna be unbelievable. We were kind of we were a little excited for it, to be really honest with you. We were pumped. We were like prepping on the plane. We're like, and we're gonna say this in response. But I'm telling you, there was a line around the block. The show sold out. Oh. And we're not talking just teenagers, parents, educators. The very first high school that welcomed us into, their halls to do a workshop about rape and slut shaming was a little high school in Moorhead, Minnesota. You know what I mean? So, and it's Lutheran as it gets. So they want to talk about it too. They need access. We need to get in there. So we're working on it. So we're going to Boston. So we're excited about that. It's pretty East Coast, pretty liberal, and it'll be great. We're going to go to DC. We're going to San Francisco, and we're really, really working hard for like some Bible Belt situation. Yeah. If you have any ideas, please let us know.
Yeah.
Last question.
Hi, thanks again for coming. I know you mentioned, so you focus on 11 to 20-year-olds for the conversations. I want to know, how can we have those types of conversations for 20 plus, and how can we kind of bridge that gap to help that education be for the older crowd too?
Yeah. Very good question.
Just do it, is what I would say. Like, I mean, it doesn't have to be anything formal. I mean, we have laid out in the book an entire activist guide at the end that Katie and I wrote that helps either with questions to start off with to help guide the conversation, or different plans of action that other people have done around the country. But really, it doesn't take much, like to just be able to sit down with a group of friends over a cup of coffee and be like, all right, let's talk about this. It's really effective. We've had so many conversations with our adult friends, and it's just about sitting around and being brave enough to start that dialogue and to be honest about how it's affecting you.
I think Google needs to start a StopSlut chapter.
Yes.
Are you guys down for this?
Google, let's
And
do
there's
it.
one thing that we find works, that we have found works. It doesn't matter the age group. It's a writing exercise, and maybe that sounds a little cheesy and a little like college writing workshop, but we have a writing prompt online that you can easily access and download, and we find if you give someone a second, if you give them 7 minutes, all it takes is 7 minutes to sit there and actually think, oh, how is this touching my life? You're gonna start to find all these things are gonna come up. And it's not just things from 7th grade or 10th grade, it's things from your subway ride, you know what I mean? It's things from that night at that get-together 2 weeks ago, I mean, I was at a party very recently with a group of friends, and I'm sitting across this gentleman who's 35 years old making rape jokes the whole night, and no one's saying anything. No one's saying anything. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, how? And the women are all making eye contact and no one is saying anything. Yeah. And it's just, it's everywhere. And so I think if you give yourself that 7 minutes to just acknowledge how it's touching your life, that's the first step. And so maybe there's like some sort of little club that you guys could start and do some writing and some reflecting.
Yeah.
Oh, just to add on, I guess what's really big is to remind ourselves, like, after 20, it doesn't mean that like life is over. And you stop partying, and you just have to find a husband, and you get married, and you won't be called a slut anymore because you're old and all that stuff. Stuff like this don't only happen to teenagers. It happens to like 35-year-olds with 3 kids at home. You know, like they're still being sexually assaulted in the streets or at work, and sad to say, like older women are being raped too, and like we shouldn't have to be afraid to open this conversation and actually speak up and tell our story. And you're not too old to tell your story if it happened like a year ago, you know? And it's like life and slut shaming doesn't end at an age. It goes on, and it's wrong. And I guess when we open the conversation, we can all like say, okay, it's wrong. It doesn't happen to only teenagers because they're fragile and small and all that stuff. It happens to all of us, and we just, it shouldn't be hard to have the conversation because you're older and you have better things to worry about, you know? So, yeah.
Well, I am so grateful to have been part of this conversation. I can't tell you, I feel educated. Or the beginning of an education is starting for me, just from having been around these guys and being exposed to their honesty and their willingness to sort of talk and be open about these incredibly important issues. And so I'd love to thank you all so much for coming, and Katie and Meg for starting this incredible thing and for keeping it going. And thank you so much to Google for hosting us. It's just an amazing platform for these guys to come and tell their story. And thank you for having us. And thank you for Feminist Press for publishing the book. And you guys can pick up the book here, I think, right?
Yeah.
At the
Right
back.
here.
Get the book. The book is awesome. I can't stop reading it. Every subway ride I'm on, I'm like, it's really good. And my 11-year-old kid keeps saying, "Mom, it's so embarrassing. You're reading that book. Please put it away." I'm like, "No. You should come to this talk with me."
That's right.
No, I'm not coming.
That's so cute.
Anyway, so thank you so much for having us and for staying long after you should be home probably. But thank you.
Thank you.